If you followed the channel long enough, you've probably noticed just how much of an affinity I have for the 90s. Don't get me wrong, I'm not one of those people who views it exclusively through nostalgia glasses and considers it to be the crowning decade in American history. There are plenty of things from that era that sucked, but I still have a fondness for it. Granted, a lot of my affinity for it probably has to do with the fact that I was a child during the 90s, and I didn't have to worry about much other than making sure I was up in time for Bucky O'Hare, but putting aside my fondness for that funky fresh rabbit, I just think the 90s were rad. I especially loved just how weird a decade it was. There were so many things made during the 90s that only make sense during the 90s. It really is an absolute abundance of hard to explains and had to be theirs. Still, even with how uniquely bizarre that time period was, there is still a shocking amount of things from that era that has faded away and classified itself as obsolete. There are a lot of things from back then that it's not even like you never see them anymore, as much as it's a case of there's really no reason for them to still exist. And there are a few things from the 90s that represent the ethos that time comes for us all, quite like the topic of today's video. This is Pop Culture Hyperfixations, and today we're taking a look at the juggernaut that was Pop-Up Video. Pop Culture Hyperfixations. Our story begins in 1994 when a man named John Sykes was hired to become the president of the music television channel VH1. Sykes was no stranger to the world of music television, as he was part of the crew that helped launch MTV back in 1981. I don't think much needs to be said about the influence of that channel, as it's well documented just how much of an impact MTV had on the culture. However, you couldn't say the same thing for its sister channel VH1. The network, which stood for Video Hits 1, was launched in 1985 and was basically an afterthought from the very beginning. The network was only launched because MTV leadership were concerned over an attempt by Ted Turner to launch his own music video channel. Turner's network only lasted 1 month, but VH1 was still kept around to try and cater to viewers in an older demographic. They had pretty much the same format as MTV, complete with a rotating cast of VJs, but the music videos selected were ones that featured artists you would never see on their sister channel. By the time Sykes took over as president in '94, that strategy of catering to baby boomers had gotten them nowhere. Ratings were so non-existent that cable companies were threatening to drop the network completely. So after inheriting a channel that had gone through nearly a decade of mediocrity, Sykes quickly got to work trying to turn it around. For starters, he decided to begin catering less to baby boomers and more to Generation X, especially those who had grown up watching MTV but had begun to feel that they had sort of aged out of it. He also knew that even though they had built the network, you couldn't rely on blocks and music videos for ratings, you needed programming. So in order to keep the channel alive, they needed some shows to call their own. It's not like VH1 hadn't had original series before, as they'd previously aired shows like the game show Rumor Has It and the Rosie O'Donnell hosted Stand Up Spotlight. But what Sykes was looking for were shows that fit the network's new ideology of music first. He wanted all the programming to connect to the idea that this is the channel you turn to when you want to watch music. Among the shows added to the channel early in his tenure were the live performance series Crossroads, the documentary series Legends, and the VH1 Top 10 Video Countdown, which was a show every week they counted down the top 10 videos on VH1.
Well, duh.
But in 1996, two 30-somethings walked into a pitch meeting with an idea that would forever change the network. Their names were Tad Lowe and Woody Thompson, and they were determined to get a show on the air. The pair had actually met as kids at a summer camp, but their working relationship began on a short-lived talk show created by former NBC president Brandon Tartikoff called Last Call. Thompson worked for the show in a behind-the-scenes capacity, while Lowe was an on-air talent. In what will become far more evident later on, even then Lowe was a controversial figure, as his antics on the short-lived series left quite the impression on Entertainment Weekly, who at one point referred to him as the biggest idiot on television. Monikers like that didn't seem to faze Lowe, whose mix of outspokenness and confidence led to him being fired from multiple jobs, and in the case of MTV, fired multiple times. He was in stark contrast to Thompson, who, while lacking the natural showmanship of Lowe, built his career working behind the scenes on acclaimed programming like Nick News. On paper, the two were an odd couple, but creatively, something between them clicked, and so they formed their own production company named Spin the Bottle. The pair spent nearly 2 years pitching their ideas, but networks weren't interested in greenlighting any series from a pair of young guys who had never launched a show before. Still, the pair were undaunted, and when they heard VH1 was looking for programming, they saw it as an opportunity to pitch to a network who desperately needed help, with Lowe comparing the network at the time to a wounded gazelle. In a meeting with VH1 executives, they brought a litany of ideas, but all of them were rejected because they didn't fit the network's vision of music first. The pair went back to the drawing board and came back with even more ideas, this time all built around music videos. They had an idea to pit multiple videos against each other in a head-to-head battle. They had an idea to mix music videos with the news of the day. They had an idea to make a sitcom that would mix in music video clips like HBO's Dream On, which I'm going to assume would have looked like this.
Yo, Mr. Banks, my tubby judicial brother.
But of all the ideas in their pitch document, the one for a show called Pop-Up Video stood out. This is the first show that gives you background information about a video while you're actually watching it. Whether through on-screen icons, telestrated handwriting, or a lower third crawl, more information comes at you than you can even handle. It's hypertext television. The inspiration for the idea is traced back to Tad Lowe's friend, celebrity stylist Tanya Twist. According to Lowe, the pair would often meet up over drinks, which would always eventually end up with Twist telling him about all the crazy things she saw one of her clients do on the set of her music videos. Lowe was floored by what he heard and began to think that people would love to hear behind-the-scenes stories like this. In interviews, he would often say that a big part of his desire to do the show was to show that we shouldn't put celebrities on a pedestal, that they are just as human and just as flawed as everybody else. Thompson was fully on board with the idea, as coincidentally he had started his career working on music video sets, so he knew firsthand just how chaotic that world was. As for the singer who inspired the show, for a long time Lowe kept their identity secret, but eventually revealed that the diva in question was none other than Mariah Carey.
Sorry, nice try.
VH1 commissioned a pilot for the astronomical price of $3,000, and the pair got to work. They started with a small crew at first, which, aside from them, also included an employee plucked from the VH1 archives named Paul Leo, who would become the show's first head writer. For those who've never seen the show before, the premise is astonishingly simple. The show would play music videos, but every few seconds, a piece of trivia would pop up on screen. Each video would feature 30 to 40 pops, and the process of doing a single video took about a month. For the behind-the-scenes trivia, the researchers for Pop-Up Video relied heavily on first-hand accounts from those involved. They occasionally got directors to talk, but they quickly learned that the best information came from crew members who were excited to share the stories nobody ever asked them. The writers generally avoided talking to any of the band members though, but there was a solid reason for that. As former writer Alan Cross explained to Uproxx,
"We actually avoided talking to singers or members of the band for a couple of reasons. They probably don't know how the video was made. The crew would more likely be excited to talk to us. And finally, it's hard to interview the singer, then pop the video, make fun of him, and feel good about yourself."
Not all pops were about behind-the-scenes gossip though, as plenty of them were just general trivia that somehow connected to the video. This was before the internet took over the world, so the researchers had to be clever with how they found information. Encyclopedias and autobiographies were strewn about the office, and they spent so much time calling the New York City Public Library information line that the library had to tell them to stop. Later on, they would have a tip line, 212-846-2POP, but as one staff member told the New York Daily News, it wasn't always reliable, saying, quote,
"A man calls drunk like once a day and yells at us that he wants people to shave their arms and stuff in the videos. It's really depressing, actually."
The original pilot featured pops of Alanis Morissette's You Learn, as well as TLC's Waterfalls. And despite some initial pushback from executives at VH1's parent company Viacom that people weren't going to want to read, VH1 executives, including John Sykes and Senior VP of Programming Lauren Zalznick, were impressed enough that they officially greenlit the series to premiere in the fall of 1996. The show quickly became the highest rated program on VH1, which, to show you how down the network was, the show they beat out for that top spot were reruns of American Bandstand. The show quickly struck a chord with viewers who loved the unique blend of trivia, gossip, and snark. I imagine part of the success had to be with the consistent and simple format that lasted for the entire run of the series, as every half-hour episode consisted of 5 different music videos getting the pop treatment. And as Thompson explained to Billboard, when it came to picking those music videos, there was a method to the madness.
The first video would be ideally a hit right now. The second would be something that was 5 years old. Third video would be 10 years old. Fourth would be a classic. And the fifth would be dessert. A little bit weird and like a wild card.
Emblematic of the types of videos you'd see in that last spot was Lionel Richie's Hello, which Thompson would later proclaim to be the best video they ever did. It's stiff competition though, as there are so many great ones. Some of my personal favorites are Touch of Grey, And We Danced, Buddy Holly, and Van Halen's Right Now. But that's mainly because I think it's hilarious to put text over a music video that already has so much text and virtually no subtext. God, the director of this video really thought he was saying something, didn't he? As the show's popularity grew, so did the staff, as more and more researchers and writers were brought in to craft the pops. Most of those hired had little to no experience in television, as Lowe and Thompson's focus was finding writers who would match the tone they had in their head. As Alan Cross explained to Uproxx,
the best description of the tone was from Tom Morrissey, a former head writer. He said to write the script so someone watching might slowly realize, holy shit, the closed caption guy is drunk.
In order to get the job, all new writers would audition by doing their own pops on the video One Headlight by the Wallflowers. They got some background information about the band, but they were encouraged to do their own research, and those who did a good enough job got to join the team. Speaking of the Wallflowers, just because the show was popular with viewers doesn't mean it was necessarily popular with artists, and one of the biggest detractors of the show was Wallflowers frontman Jakob Dylan. Jacob was incredibly sensitive when people tried to talk to him about his legendary father, Bob, and allegedly insisted that reporters not bring him up. While Lowe and Thompson found this so absurd that when they featured the band on the show, their original pop-up version was chock full of references to the works of Bob, which made Jacob furious. He wasn't alone though, as more than a few artists were upset by what they saw on the show. Billy Joel got angry they referenced his ex-wife Christy Brinkley's alleged infidelity, Meat Loaf was upset that the show discussed his bankruptcy, and Matchbox 20 were mad because they were mean about Matchbox 20. That's not even including other people they pissed off, like Tommy Mottola, Sheryl Crow, and director Mark Pellington, who not only called the writer of his episode to chew her out, but also sent an angry letter to Lowe and Thompson, part of which says,
I ask you a simple question. What have you ever created of any merit, either socially or aesthetically? My track record and credibility as director are far from intellectually vacuous. You take something clever and turn it into something mean. I would have far more respect if one of you had the guts to call me and explain your motivations for the slanderous statement. This is my reputation that you're defaming, and I am deeply offended.
By the way, that was all over a Bon Jovi video. These clashes with musicians put the show often at odds with VH1, who would periodically either revise or completely remove episodes that alienated the musicians. They never doubted the veracity of the claims, as their lawyers combed through everything to make sure they weren't being slanderous, but often the network was just trying to stay in the good graces of some of the musicians they thought were important. Lowe and Thompson, but especially Lowe, were incredibly antagonistic towards the network and were determined to protect the artistic integrity of the show. As Thompson told Uproxx,
Tad fought with the network on the show's behalf to make sure they did not censor our pops. He won a few battles and lost a lot, but those he won went a long way to cementing our reputation for being bad boys and the show being dangerous.
The pair didn't just fight with the network behind closed doors, they would air their grievances publicly as well, with Lowe going as far as to call John Sykes a sycophant. And while Lowe told people that he was so vocal because he was trying to protect their vision of the show, former head writer Paul Leo had a different view of it during an appearance on the Old Millennials podcast.
Tad and Woody were fighting to get control of the show for themselves, because at the time when you got something picked up by VH1 or MTV, you had to make it their property, let them have it, and they in turn hired you to produce it, but just on a salary basis. So they were adamant that they wanted that property. They wanted to control the property. And part of Tad's lunacy was agitating to make everybody hate him so they'll kick him out so he could sue to get the show.
Publicly, VH1's feelings on the matter seem to border on bemusement. As Senior VP Lauren Zalznick told Brills Magazine,
I think they believe every word of what they're saying. Still, I would point out that they make their living making television shows, which in and of itself puts them on the side of commerce and collusion, and there's no two ways about it. They are not documentary filmmakers struggling to expose the new payola. They are not Ralph Nader.
the show was such a huge success for the network that they were pretty unfazed by Lowe and Thompson being pain in the asses. Under John Sykes' leadership, the network had completely changed its fortunes and was entering its golden age. Ratings were going up every month, and pop-up video was a big part of it. The show was being aired multiple times a day, and alongside a pair of other new shows, Storytellers and Behind the Music, formed the cornerstone of the music first era. Lowe and Thompson may not have owned the show, but they were still reaping some benefits. Disney paid $500,000 for the right to take the first look at their projects, and they got a Sweeps Week special on UPN in 1998 called The Alt Games, which is my holy grail of lost media, and if anyone knows where to find it, please let me know. On top of that, they also wrote a pop-up video book and launched Pop-Up 80s, which was the first of many spin-off ideas they had, including a pop-up interview show and a pop-up history show, which would feature pops over notable historical events, which could have gone real badly. There were discussions for pop versions of Grease and Rocky Horror, as well as a potential made-for-TV comedy movie written by Paul Leo, but none of those ideas ever came to fruition. What did come to fruition was a series of specials for other shows, including News Radio, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and Oprah. That Oprah edition almost didn't happen, as Lowe got into a dispute with her staff during production so bad that he was almost kicked off the show before it was even filmed. I think even by his own admission, Lowe might categorize himself as a stubborn guy who didn't like being told what to do, and that even applied to Oprah. Still, the people he really didn't like telling him what to do was VH1. And by far the biggest gripe him and Thompson had with the network were about other people using their idea. They were incredibly critical of other shows that used their format, but they were outright livid that VH1 was allowing it to happen. Sure, the network was getting paid to license the idea, but they felt it was costing the show its integrity. A Bell Atlantic ad led to multiple angry posts on their website, and a popped edition of Sabrina the Teenage Witch made them even more upset. They thought the network was diluting their brand by allowing such cheap imitators to do what only they could do. Anyways, here's an unrelated video from Comedy Central in 1992.
1. Bill Clinton's economic plan and his agenda will make matters much, much worse. He will raise your taxes, he will increase spending, he will make government bigger, jobs will be lost.
The tension wasn't just growing with the network, it was growing between each other. Thompson and Lowe were beginning to clash more frequently, and it was beginning to affect the show. As Paul Leo recounted,
things got progressively uglier and more tense between them. The last 6 months or so before they actually split, it felt like the rest of us were miserable kids at the mercy of our parents going through an extremely nasty divorce.
Ultimately, the big moment people turned to as the beginning of the end was the 2000 TV Guide Awards, when during Carson Daly's acceptance speech, Tad Lowe crashed the stage and had to be thrown out by security. Most people would call that pulling a Kanye, but the real ones know it's actually called pulling an ODB. This behavior was too much for Thompson and VH1, and eventually a decision was made to end the partnership. Lowe kept Spin the Bottle, while Thompson continued to produce pop-up video on his own. The show continued on for a couple years, and that time period would see pop-up versions of the Brady Bunch air on Nickelodeon, as well as another spin-off at VH1 with the short-lived Pop-Up Quiz. In 2002, the network stopped ordering new episodes, and for the time being, pop-up video had come to an end. Lowe continued to work in television for various networks, including for another music channel, Fuse, which is where in 2006, he created the most 2006 show of all time, Pants Off, Dance Off. Thompson also continued to work in television, and in 2011, he actually brought pop-up video back. While VH1 thought it would fit perfectly in the media landscape at the time, the rise of the internet had unfortunately made a lot of the show's appeal obsolete. The revival only lasted 2 seasons before it went back on the shelf for good. Both men are still active in television to this day and have worked with everyone from the MSG Network to HGTV to the Children's Television Workshop to The Situation. While the show is gone, it is not forgotten. Over time, those familiar pops have wormed their way into our collective subconscious and become a shared cultural touchstone. Lowe and Thompson both look back on their time with the show fondly, and Lowe has assured it would never be truly forgotten when he donated their archives to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It truly was a phenomenon that captured the imaginations of those who lived it. And if you weren't around back then and want to know just what was it about pop-up video that made it so iconic, well, I guess you just had to be there. Hey, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit the like button, and if you want to see more of my stuff, hit subscribe. And hey, what's your favorite pop-up video? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.